Welcome to an early Sunday morning visit to the village of Southorpe. I think it's pronounced Southorpe, could be Southorpe, but I think it's Southorpe, derived from Southorpe meaning South Village, probably south of Barnack, which is where we are, about a mile short of Barnack. The reason we're here is there's two small nature reserves here, pretty insignificant on the map, no real size to either, but both have orchids listed in the list of plants that can be found here, so it's worth taking a look. I did visit this one about 5-6 years ago, found a few common spotted, not a lot else, but you know that was 5 or 6 years ago, so it's probably worth checking out. This one is the paddock, Southorpe paddock. About 3/4 of a mile down the road on the other side of the village is Southorpe meadow, which I've never visited before. That is an old grass meadow, hay meadow, so that'll be interesting to see what's there. Well, both sites should be interesting because I really haven't got much of a clue as to what we're looking for. The interesting and significant element of this site, really, in terms of the orchids, is the ridge that you can just see behind this telegraph pole. Slide to the right, just behind there there's a ridge running across. That ridge is the embankment from the old railway line that used to run from Wansford out to Stamford, a very short-lived railway line that closed very early in the 1900s, and it's that embankment and the soil that was obviously piled up around that embankment that is supposedly where the orchids are meant to grow. There's obviously some limestone presence in there, so the grass is long and the grass is wet, so this won't be too comfortable, but we're going to be heading out towards that ridge and seeing what might be growing on there. Well, there you go. That will be a pyramidal orchid, and it's the only thing I've found in this entire field so far. Well, that not quite yet pyramidal orchid is about as exciting as it got in this one. It's a classic example, really, of a reserve that's just been left to its own devices, which can be great at times, and it's unspoilt and untouched and whatever, but all that's happened really is the grass has grown to about 3 to 4 feet tall, which isn't nice on a morning like this when it's soaking wet, but there's no chance of orchids growing here because they're just being swamped by the vegetation around it. I'm sure if the field was grazed and managed and looked after, and some of this incredibly dense and tall meadow grasses were cropped down, I'm sure orchids would pop up in numbers, but it is just horrendous, really. It's literally 3 to 4 foot tall with grasses, and you're not going to find orchids growing in amongst that lot. So worth checking out, and if you ever look at Southorpe paddock on the map and on Google, and you see orchids listed underneath as a reason for visiting here, then don't bother. There's nothing here, and there wasn't really anything here 5 or 6 years ago, and it hasn't changed. It needs better managing, really. Well, we've moved through the village now to the other end, and yeah, Southorpe meadow, which looks a lot more attractive and is a lot more attractive than the paddock was. It's a good sort of ridge and furrow landscape here, so this is a very old untouched, uncultivated field, and I can see orchids all around me, so I'm going to get down, take a closer look and see what we've got here. Well, there's certainly plenty of southern marsh orchids around, which is always a good sign. A nicely marked common spotted orchid. That's an interesting looking flower. It's got the markings of a southern marsh orchid, but it's got the flowering form of an early marsh orchid. I mean, I'd love to think it's a hybrid of the two, but I've not seen any early marsh orchid here. But that's an unusual looking southern marsh orchid, if that's what it is. No, I can't really make this one out. Certainly the flower shape is more early marsh than southern marsh, but whether that makes it a potential hybrid, I don't know. That's an interesting one. It's a very nicely marked southern marsh orchid. Nice colour too. Well, this one was standing loud and proud from some 50 metres away. That's an absolutely clonking 15-16 inches tall southern marsh orchid. Very nice specimen. Another one of these strange southern marsh orchids that have got the flower sort of reflexed backwards to form the shape of the sort of more early marsh orchid type flowers. I'll have to look into this one. I'm not 100% sure there's any sort of hybridization, but it's certainly different in flower shape to the other southern marsh orchids on this site. And there's another of these reflexed southern marsh orchids. My theory that there's some early marsh orchid going on with these plants would stand up better if I could find an early marsh orchid, but I haven't found any yet, so it seems to be all southern marsh really, and a few common spotted, but yeah, there seems to be quite a lot of these where the flower is reflexed backwards or inward. Nicely marked common spotted. This is a nicely coloured flower, not tremendously dissimilar to the plant that I said was a definite hybrid a little further back, but this one is actually a definite common spotted. Even if it has the colouring of a southern marsh, it's definitely common spotted because the leaves, you can make them out in there. There we go. They are spotted. So that's a definite common spotted. Some lovely markings on this common spotted. Another nicely marked common spotted orchid. There's some really nice ones in this field. There you go. What are you going to call that one as? It's a marsh orchid, but yeah, those markings are not typical southern marsh orchid. Could be a hybrid. If there were heath spotted orchids here, I might call that as a heath spotted orchid stroke common spotted orchid. It's certainly not a regulation southern marsh orchid. It's a big plant as well, which is usually a sign of hybridization, but it's a very nice plant, nicely coloured, nicely marked. Well, there you have it, Southorpe Meadow, just down the road from Barnack. And as I say, it's a site I've never been to before, but I can definitely say this will be on my A-list now for future seasons. An absolute belter of a site. Absolutely awash with southern marsh orchids. Probably, well, I hate to estimate, it's a big site of probably 300 plus southern marsh orchids, common spotted orchids, undoubted hybrids between the two. Not seen any early marsh orchids, sorry, but I don't know, they might be here, but who cares? It's a wonderful, wonderful, unspoilt, well looked after flower meadow, and yeah, month of June, get down here. It's an absolutely wonderful place, wonderful site for a Sunday morning, and yeah, full of orchids. Brilliant, brilliant.